If you're going to work in phenomics, there's several things you need to have at least a fundamental understanding of. If you're going to be making measurements, then of course you need to have some understanding of how to lay out the experiment, what measurements might be needed, and how you're going to be able to test your hypothesis. And when you are working as in the field, then you have protocols that have to be followed. We can't be sloppy in our data acquisition, whether it's by hand or by in terms of the remotely sensed data. The remote sensing piece of it, which is where I primarily work, has a lot of information that's disinformation, I think, that people have acquired over time or been exposed to over time. And a lot of that has to do with the capability that is possible with different kinds of sensing technologies. And let me just give you an example. Everybody's used to what you see with a regular camera, the red, green, blue. And we think that what we see with our eye is, the reality. Well, it's reality, but only within the part of the electromagnetic spectrum, the light that we actually can sense with our detectors in our eyes. A lot of the sensing that is done that's useful for plants is in other parts of the spectrum. And in particular, one part is the near infrared, because plants healthy plants reflect a lot in the near infrared, and they absorb in the red part of the spectrum. So we use that information, that one part's high, one part's low, to actually make some crude kind of measurements on how healthy those plants are.
Anyone working in the area of field phenomics needs a set of core skills. These include things such as data management, data analysis, data collection, how to set up a field research trial, how to manage that research trial, how to calibrate and operate sensors, how to choose the right genetics or the right management practices to actually impose in your field experiment.
In my opinion, the challenge for scientists moving forward, those that are interested in working in this field, is not how do I collect the data, because it's relatively easy to collect high resolution, vast quantities of data. The challenge really is how do I extract data from those images for plants that are growing in plots in the fields that are being evaluated. The collecting of data, the calibration of those cameras is very challenging. The processing of those remote sensing data and interpreting them in terms of predicting plant traits that we can understand, and in some cases processing remote sensing data to extract traits that we're not even aware of, that we've not been able to measure before. That is the real challenge moving forward, and what I expect to see dramatic improvements in the next few years, perhaps over the next decade, to develop a better understanding of the relationship between remotely sensed data being collected on different types of platforms and interpreting traits from the data that are being collected.
For people working in phenomics, some of the things they really need to understand are the regulations behind unmanned aircraft, the types of sensors that people are using now, how to actually make use of the imagery once you've collected it, and how to deal with all of the data that you collect while you're out in the field.
And I think one of the things that people are becoming aware of is that when you work in phenomics, then you need to expand your horizon relative to what can be learned from the spectrum. Interestingly, a lot of plant scientists have already been doing this in a different mode. They've been working in the laboratory for a long time. Their protocols are very strict, their handling of specimens is very strict, but somehow when we move to the field, we seem to just lose that. And so it's very important to actually be very careful. It's very important to be careful in terms of geometry, because we're going to make repeat measurements and we want to look at those plants throughout the growing season. It's very important to have well-calibrated sensors. And then it's very important to know something about how you analyze the data, even if you're using software or having it done on the cloud by a company, because a black box is just what it is. You get what comes out the other side. So having some understanding is important.
I think currently in the next 5 years, the most critical thing is to begin to accumulate your training data sets, and you want to do that the right way, whether it's through experimental design or using the right sensor and really being strategic about your activity in this area so that you can build, years worth of valuable data.